Hi, I'm Gabrielle Liu. I'm representing the Educating All Learners Alliance. I'm the Marketing and Communications Manager, and we're really excited to have two of our partner organizations join us today. So the Educating All Learners Alliance, or ELA as we like to call it, represents a coalition of over 100 partner organizations that seek to promote best practices that support students with disabilities. So we curate a resource library that has, like I said, best practices. We also produce content like this, webinars and podcasts, and share that out. And so we're really happy to have both Learning Heroes and EdChoice join us today. So first you'll see we have Paul DePerna, who is the Vice President of Research and Innovation at EdChoice. And we also have Wendy Lopez-Aflito, who is the Vice President of Content and Partnerships at Learning Heroes. And so this session is really going to dive into both organizations' polling data on parents and their feelings towards the education sector right now. Some data will speak more towards parents' feelings on educational environments. Some will speak more towards parents' feelings on their students' academic performance. And then we'll kind of reflect on what that means for educators, parents, and school districts. So we're really excited to kick it off. I'll first pass it over to Paul to take it away.
Thanks a lot, Gabrielle. It's great to be here with all of you. Good afternoon to everyone, and appreciate the opportunity to share some of our survey and polling data that we've been collecting over recent months. And so it's really great to be here with all of you. I'll share my screen here in just a second. And so just a little background. I'm the Vice President of Research and Innovation at EdChoice. And so I manage and direct our surveys and polling that we do at the national level. We also do some state polling that my colleague Drew Catt also oversees. And this is an area of research we've been involved in for probably about a dozen years or so. And we conduct monthly polling with our partners at Morning Consult, and we also have a national poll that we've been conducting since 2013 with Braun Research. And so just a quick background about EdChoice. We've been around since 1996, and we were first known as the Milton and Rose D. Friedman Foundation. And our mission is to advance educational freedom and choice for all as a pathway to successful lives and a stronger society. And so the scope of our work can really be at the national level or at the state level, and oftentimes focusing on a single state's educational environment, particularly in K-12 education. And we really try to inform and educate around issues and topics around expanding access and opportunities in K-12 education. And so we do this in 5 main areas: communications and marketing. We also have a focused state investments program. Focused state investments is a fancy way of saying state level advocacy. We have a legal defense and education center that's focused on litigation that's at the state or federal levels. A training and outreach team who's very active, and they're excited to get back out there in person doing events and meetings. And they were just at South by Southwest EDU a couple of weeks ago. And then the team that I am in is the research and thought leadership team. And so we do a lot of surveys, polling, fiscal research, and other types of empirical research around K-12 education and choice. And so just to give a little background about the partnership that we just launched with Morning Consult a couple of years ago, right before the pandemic hit. In January 2020, we launched a monthly poll with Morning Consult. And just to give a little background, we survey roughly 2,200 respondents each month of the general public, a nationally representative sample of the general public. And then of those, we oversample and we collect around 1,200 responses every month from parents of school-age children in K-12 education. And then of those parents, we usually get about 20 to 25% of that sample would be a parent with at least one child in K-12 education who has a diagnosed disability, either physically, learning disability, or social emotional disability. And so that's a population that I'll focus on here for the next 5 or 6 minutes as we go through some of the findings from the recent months of our polling. And so that's, as part of every month, we have at least 1 or 2 reports based on our surveys that we are doing with Morning Consult, and we always include a survey profile just to be very transparent and to give just the background and the context of the surveys that we do. And so one important thing to note is that most of the data that you'll see reflects the responses that we've collected from October through January, late fall and into the winter, and that's based on our national sample of the general public. And it's based on this non-probability online panel survey that's conducted every month. And you can find more information about our methods on the website at this URL here. And here, these are just the definitions. This is how we identify parents in our samples who have at least one child that's under the age of 18, that's enrolled in school, who has an individualized education program, or they may have a similar special services plan if they're not in a public school. And so that makes up, that's how we identify our special education parents. And then the comparison group for some of these slides that you'll see in a moment are parents of school-age children who do not have a diagnosed disability of any kind. And so here we'll see just what the levels of disruption were felt between these two groups. And you can see that special education parents were more likely to report that the pandemic has been very disruptive in their personal routine. There's a difference of eight points compared to non-special needs parents. And same at the household level, how they feel about their family routine. And then we ask about their local community too. So they're just more likely to say, hey, the pandemic has been a shock to the, and to our routines and disruptive to our routines. And for this slide, we see this looking at how satisfied parents are of their different schooling experiences. And so this is if the parent would report as a homeschool, their satisfaction for homeschooling, as for private schooling, charter schooling, district schooling, if they have at least 1 year of experience with any of these types of schooling. So it could even be, so this is very much like a reflective type of assessment. And you can see that special education parents, both types of parents are more likely to be satisfied with homeschooling and private schooling than compared to, say, district schooling, and reporting to be very satisfied. And so, but the differences aren't that dramatic between those two groups for any one of those schooling types. Homeschooling has gotten a lot of attention over the last couple of years because everybody was parents. I'm a parent of 2 children, actually. I mean, both of our girls have IEPs, and so this is very, very close to home. A lot of these questions and what we're looking at right now. But everybody became a homeschooler to some degree in the spring of 2020. We don't have data that goes that far back, but a question that we have been asking is to what degree parents have been more favorable or less favorable towards the idea of homeschooling. And you can see how this has jumped around a bit over the last year plus, but that special education parents, when you look at this 70% number, they're more likely to be favorable than non-special needs parents at 62%. Both are much more likely to be positive about homeschooling than negative about homeschooling. And then we ask a question about, if a parent feels that their schools or districts should offer more than, if they should offer multiple learning options. And the big takeaway is 3/4 of special education parents believe that their schools, their school districts should offer multiple learning options. And that's been a very consistent finding month to month. And it's very similar. Special education parents, non-special needs parents are at 71%. You can see even breaking out by demographics. This is, there's a lot of similarities, nothing very, significantly different across these different demographic groups within the special education parents population. So it's been a very consistent finding that roughly 7 out of 10 to 3/4 of parents would like to have options when it comes to their child's schooling. And this is just, we do survey teachers every quarter. And this is, you can see here, 72% of teachers in December felt the same way. So there's just some common ground there in terms of their views about access and options in K-12 education. And we ask, how helpful do you think any of these potential remedies or resources, provisions could be helpful in the next school year for their child? So we're asking this of parents, and you can see that 73% of special education parents believe an individualized learning plan would be helpful. And that's 12 points higher than non-special needs parents. And there's a good reason for that, because if you're a parent of a child with a disability in school, you're likely to have some sort of plan with that school or district, an IEP or something similar. And so this is something that's already been socialized among our community of parents. And you can see there are just differences all across the board through all of these items between special ed parents and non-special needs parents about the level of how helpful each of these things would be. And teachers, they think that one thing, it was interesting to see that teachers are more likely to say counseling, mental health supports for children and staff would be very helpful. And so that's a little bit different than the responses that we saw from parents. And so that came at 70% total helpful. We ask, after the pandemic, if given the option, to what extent would you like to have schooling scheduled at home or outside of the home? And so now that parents have experienced this remote hybrid dynamic off and on over the last 2.5 school years, it's been interesting to see that about 2/3 would say they'd like at least one day at home of special education parents. So they'd like that flexibility. About a third would like to have full-time schooling in the more traditional sense. And little differences here among special education parents by grade spans, but you can see that there are differences when you compare this 33% to 43% of the non-special needs parents. And teachers, you can see that and this is a little bit flipped, but you can see that the teachers are more likely to say about half of teachers would like to be teaching at school and not in a hybrid style or even like fully in a pod or homeschool, in a homeschooling environment. Now, I mentioned pods a second ago. Learning pods have emerged in the last couple of years as a result of the pandemic, and these are fairly informally organized groups of students being taught by a teacher or a tutor, a very small group. And it's usually, it could be at a parent's house or almost like a co-op arrangement. And we've seen these emerge in different parts of the country. And special education parents were more likely to say that they were participating in a learning pod. 30% said they were participating in a learning pod in the late fall and winter, compared to 12% of non-special needs parents. So that's pretty dramatic. And so that was definitely something that stood out. And the differences also appeared among tutoring too. Special education parents were more likely to say that they had a child that was being tutored, almost twice as likely as non-special needs parents. And then finally, we, in the area of public policy, and that's something that our organization has a focus on, and we look at different types of school choice, educational choice policies like education savings accounts, school vouchers, charter schools, open enrollment policies. And we ask questions about support without any information about those policies and with a brief description. And you can see that even without information, almost about roughly 2/3 of special education parents support ESAs, school vouchers, charter schools. And then when they're given a description, ESAs being basically a government authorized funding account for parents to use for either private school tuition, or other types of tuition, or physical therapy, therapies for children with disabilities, online courses. So it's a multi-use type of account, education account, funding account. And so with information, about 4 out of 5 special education parents say they support that type of policy. And it's pretty similar with vouchers and charter schools. And so I don't want to run over my time, so I'll just say thank you very much. And please feel free to contact me directly if you have questions or ideas for future research and surveys. And my email address is there, and I will pass things over to Wendy now. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Paul. Give me a moment here while I share my screen. Hopefully you guys can see that. So my name is Wendy. I am VP of Content and Partnerships at Learning Heroes, mom of 2, former teacher. So like you, Paul, a lot of the data and experiences I'm going to be sharing today are also near and dear to my heart, especially over the past couple of years. So some of the research findings, this is just a snapshot, and I'm going to try and talk really quickly because we're tight on time. The full report for Parents 2021, beyond the headlines, responding to what parents, teachers, and principals really want, is on our website at bealearninghero.org. So a bit about Learning Heroes. Our mission is pretty simple. It is to support parents so that they can be the best advocates for their children's success in school and in life. We really believe that parents are the experts of their children. And so we start everything we do by deep listening. We've done over the past 6 years 15 national parent reports, a lot of qualitative in addition to that quantitative, to really dig deep into issues like language, what resonates with families, what doesn't. It's all third-party research. Our research partner is Edge Research. And we always, and this is really important because you'll see some of the data called out throughout the slides, do an oversample with African-American and Latino families, low-income families, to really be able to segment out the data and better understand, because we know parents are not monolithic and really want to be able to meet parents where they are, like I said, and really maximize their roles. So it's really only when we see a gap in our research that we create new content. And what we strive to do is support parents with relevant, actionable information throughout the year. We've traditionally really worked in the K-8 space, though we do have some resources for middle school parents who are transitioning their kids into high school. We also really focus on transition points. So end of school year, for example, leaning into summer to maximize that summer as a transition into the new school year. And we are really excited about building out this year our support for schools and districts because we know that educators need a lot of support, as you're going to see in the data, to really bring together homes and schools in support of student learning. All of our resources, and we're going to be adding some new content and updates at the end of this month, again, is at our website. So another really important piece around our research, we are not a big household name, and we're sort of aware of that. And we sort of sit as in the back as a back engine to provide research insights to the field broadly. And we're really humbled by this slide. This is just a sampling of the kinds of organizations that we work with. You'll see Educating All Learners on there. We strive to make our research really actionable and accessible so that collectively we can better support parents and educators to partner. In addition to sharing our research, we create our resources with the intent of our partners using them on the front line, since we are not direct service providers. So our resources are meant to be adapted, customized to meet local context. So a bit about some of the data, and again, this is just a snapshot. The full methodology and deck is on our site. It was a pretty robust survey, so over 1,400 parents, over 600 educators, teachers, and principals. It was fielded in September. And this report also brings together some of our previous data. So if we do have time for questions, can give some additional insights again over the past 6 years. We've been in the field in one way or another since the pandemic. So have learned a lot. I'll start with the positive really briefly, and that is that parents' hopes and dreams for their children remain really high. When we ask parents, how important is it for your child to go to college, you'll see 80% said absolutely essential or very. An important part for me on this slide is to really note we've been tracking this question over the past several years, and you'll see that traditionally Black and Latino families have a very high priority, even more so than their white peers. And why that's important is because, as we are working collectively to really dispel the myth that those parents won't show up, right? They won't show up to parent-teacher conference, or that they don't care. They do care. They really care. It is a priority for them. And so we always, like to really highlight that piece of data. So the not so good news, they have really high aspirations, but there still continues to be a massive disconnect. And this has become sort of our seminal finding that we have been tracking over the past several years. And that is that 92% of parents, regardless of race, income, or education, believe their child is at or above grade level. 92%. When you compare that to national and regional data that says that it's only closer to a third, 35% of our students doing grade level work. And in this latest survey, 44% of the teachers we surveyed said students are arriving prepared for grade level work. So for us, that is sort of our North Star and where we sit and what we're focused on with our resources and our support for school. We've been digging into that, and we won't have time, but I just want to share this, that there are a lot of variables involved, but a big part of the disconnect is that parents are relying mostly on grades, and this is not their fault. Grades are what we focus on, I think, as a field. Parents are reporting consistently that their children are getting B's or better. They believe those B's or better equate grade level, and teachers tell us very quickly it in fact means effort as much as it does mastery of content. So for us, this also says that it's solvable. This is to a certain degree, right, communicating data in ways that are accessible for parents so that they have access to the same kind of information that teachers are using to inform their teaching. Looking at some new data point, for me, this is one of the most compelling pieces of data that came out of this new body of research. And that is that over the past few years, we've been saying that parents deserve and need an accurate picture. But in this data, we're hearing that they are asking for it. They want a clear picture. So when we ask parents, what are the top things you want as it relates to how your school communicates with you? Number one, making sure that they have a clear picture of how their child is achieving academically. The second is being direct and truthful about their child's performance. And the third is, again, yes, sharing that information is important, but the follow through, teachers, staff, and following up with their requests, right? To me, that speaks to the relationship building piece, so that sharing of data is made actionable. For sake of time, I'm not going to go into it. I know there's a lot on the screen, but also, I think, compelling and motivating piece is that teachers and principals agree, right? They are aligned with that building trust with families is important. Sharing clear and accurate information is important. So this is why we sort of titled the research Beyond the Headlines, which the headlines, over the past few years have been very divisive. Let's just call it that, right? And for us, this really speaks to an opportunity to highlight that, in fact, teachers and principals and educators are aligned on things that matter most. I'm going to speed through because I only have a couple more minutes, but we also see that parents are more engaged than ever. There has been a big uptick. The greens signifies an increase from May 2020 on the kinds of actions that parents are prepared and want to do. So talking with their children around assignments, getting a better understanding of their child's grade level. So this, again, speaks to opportunity and that parents are engaged. They also really call out that they acknowledge that schools need to do more as it relates to addressing bias from school staff. And that is aligned with what teachers say, which is that they acknowledge that they need support. So you'll see here that a high number of teachers say it's not easy to build strong relationships with families, to communicate difficult information. So we need to be doing a better job as a field in creating those systems that really bring parents and teachers together so that they can each do their jobs, right? Because at the end of the day, family engagement helps teachers do their job more effectively. And then lastly, I'll end. I mentioned that we dig deep into language. We wanted to know, we asked, which of the following terms or phrases best represent the language you use to describe your goal for family engagement? And really interestingly, we all use partnership a lot. That wasn't what rose to the top. Trust and teamwork is what rose to the top consistently for parents, principals, and teachers. And so, lots to unpack there for me. It's sort of, and we've done some sort of more anecdotal focus groups following up on this. Partnership sounds a bit transactional, sounds a bit heavy, right? Whereas trust and teamwork feels like that two-way communication, building that team. Again, this is just a snapshot. The full report is on the site. And I don't know if we have that much time for questions, but really appreciate the opportunity to share some of this.
Yeah, thank you both so much. And yeah, I'll definitely, for the sake of time and respecting our speakers, we'll wrap up shortly, but I do want to call out the emphasis on teamwork. And I think both sets of data really emphasize that for some things, there is that disconnect maybe between parents and teachers specifically. And I think that might seem negative to schools, but I really think that it's a good opportunity in the education sector. And we can see this as a time to really bring together both of those groups and the additional group of schools and school districts to really find the best way forward as we re-envision how students can learn best. So I want to thank you both so much. I know you'll have to jump, so thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Great. Yeah, appreciate it.